Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for attending our midpoint check-in today. You are all part of round 27. And a couple of rounds ago, we were asking folks, hey, what could we do better? What are we missing here? And the big takeaway was this. When you all get started, you are in a kickoff meeting with us, and everybody shares their experiences, their ideas. Everyone's real excited. We go over a bunch of paperwork, and then everybody's okay on the paperwork. And then there's no communication from us officially, except for here's when the semester reports are due, and if we see some questions from the semester reports, we'll get back to you. There's this kind of gap in between. And folks were saying like it's kind of jarring when all of a sudden you're at the final report and it's like, holy moly, nobody outside of my team has talked with us since then. So the midpoint is a way for us to all check in with each other, talk a little bit about what the midpoint of a project feels like, what it looks like, and what some experienced folks experienced before in the middle of a midpoint. So that's what we're going over today. And then we'll do a couple of reminders and things like that along the way. One thing that I have to do is to opt out of the AI reader, particularly read.ai, which loves to get started automatically without you knowing. And so I am just hitting opt out on that. There we go. That is just due to guidelines by ITS over in the USG, which is in charge of our instance of teams and stuff like that. All right. I'm going to turn it over to Nikita to just talk a little bit about the agenda and introduce our panel, and then I'll get started on the panel questions.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. And good afternoon, everyone. And so just in case you forgot, I'm sure you remember, but that is Jeff Gallant that you spoke to, our director. And I am Nikita Afaha, the project manager for you guys. Jeff is kind of our admin, leadership, strategic guy, and I'm operations, if you want to think about it like that. Although when you communicate with us, both of us in the email is the best way to do that. Today's agenda is packed, so I'll get started. We're going to start off with our grantee panel. I'll introduce our panelists in just a minute. Then we're going to take a quick 10-minute break because the panel should be pretty intense. And when we get back, we're going to have a collaborative session on Padlet where you'll be able to share with each other a little bit more. And I think that will be really impactful for you as well. So stick around for that and stick around for our next steps and reminders, which will be really important as you head into the second half of your project. After that, we should have time for questions and for a wrap up. Now, let's get started with our panel introductions. I'm battling a little bit of a cold today, so I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves in the order in which you're listed here on the slide. So if you would unmute, Rebecca, and go ahead and introduce yourself, just tell us who you are and where you're from and what your affiliation is with Affordable Learning Georgia.
Sure.
Or why we chose you.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Hope that your week is going very well. I'm staying warm. So my name is Rebecca Flynn. I work at Georgia Gwinnett College. I am the first year writing coordinator, and I'm also the assistant chair to the English department. And how I'm involved in ALG grants is that me and my team, we have created several proposals that were accepted, one that was not, that we revised, and then it was accepted second round. And what we have been working on is sort of a scaffolded first year writing program at GGC with ALG grants. And we also received a research grant.
You can see why Rebecca was chosen. She has a wealth of information and has gone through some challenges, and that will be something that you'll benefit from. Julie? Is Julie online there?
Yeah, sorry, I was getting unmuted there.
No worries, no worries.
Everybody. I'm Julie Lester, and I'm at Valdosta State University, and I teach in the political science department. My affiliation with ALG, first grant was with a colleague at my former institution in the first round of grants, and then I'm also a grantee for this cycle. And the first cycle, we looked at implementing OER and doing research in the American Government Political Science 1101, and I'm taking it to a different class, a 3000 level state and local government class right now. So that's my affiliation. I look forward to chatting more with you all.
Indeed. Thank you. Todd, you're next.
Hey guys, I'm Todd Lindley, and I'm a professor of geography, also at Georgia Gwinnett College. Hey Rebecca, how you doing? Um, and I also have come down with something kind of bad overnight, so I don't sound so good. But there's no way I was going to miss this, especially since it's just remote. But I wasn't really that excited about applying for a grant to ALG when my group first started, and so I have a colleague, David Durrell, who applied. And one of the things that I would share is that he brought a few of the rest of us in, even though he did 80% of the work. And as it turns out, by doing that, and I didn't really believe in ALG's mission in a way, because of, the way that we view things like Wikipedia and other open source sort of documents, that is problematic when it's open source and that it's not as vetted. But I changed my tune after working through the first grant. And so we've applied for a grant basically every 2 years since 2016, 2018, 2020, and we're on our fifth grant right now. And I don't say that to brag, but because with each grant that we did, it led us into something else. And so I don't know how Jeff feels about that, if he feels like we're just milking this cow too much. But quite honestly, it's not like we're creating things from scratch. It's something that needs to be done as the next phase in the grant. So we teach many of the same sections over and over again, which is maybe true for some of the other members here. I don't know, but that's how it is for us. So thanks for having me today. I really appreciate it.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Todd, as well. Joining us with kind of not feeling 100% like I am, but I'm glad you're here, especially because of your background and your approach to ALG. And so, as you guys can see, this panel is going to get pretty interesting as we share perspectives from a lot of different roads to ALG. And so, you're next, or final.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Soma. I teach in the biology department at Augusta University. First, like ALG got my attention, that was a very perfect timing. We were having difficulty with our animal dissection model. For the anatomy, it was a very popular model was cat, and then there was a scarcity of cat from suppliers. Everybody laughs when they hear that, and they say that there are cats in the neighborhood, but we cannot use animals like that. So we were thinking of an alternate option, and then rabbit. We decided on rabbit, and there was no good resource available at that time. There were some sketches. There was one book which was entirely sketches. So I applied for the grant, collaborated with one of my department members, and we received the grant. That was the first from our department on rabbit anatomy. And by this time, it is not only used by all members of our department, but also a number of other USG institutes they're using. And from other resources, we see that there are downloads from 29 different countries. So these resources not only helping us here, but other people as well, which is the main mission for the open learning resources. And from that point, we received, I'm working on, this is the fifth grant, 3 of which I am PI, and 2 others, I am a co-PI. So there are lots of good experiences, students like it, cost saving benefits are there, and then opportunity to upgrade and transform the resources as well. Thank you so much for having me.
Soma, thank you so much. And as you can see, everybody, we're really excited for you to join in on this panel, more than just so you can snag some hesitant faculty next time to apply, but also for you to learn from each other and really find some inspiration as we head on to the second half. So we'll move on to the grantee questions, and I'll turn it over to Jeff, and he'll get started with their information.
All right. So the first question for the group is, where were you in the midpoint of your project? And we're going to start out in the order of introduction. So we'll start out with Rebecca.
Hi again. So I'm going to be really boring and say I was on target. And I give, credit to the fact that the team was just very responsive to the itinerary that we had set out and the progress midpoint that we had internally with the team where we would meet and discuss and plan out. So I have some tips on how to do that we can cover later, but I think some other people may have more interesting responses for this particular question.
Sounds good to me. So then we will go on to Julie. This was round one. This was over 10 years ago. So I don't know. Maybe you've got a total memory of it. I'm not sure.
You're outing me on my age here a little bit.
Well, hey, me too. I've been here the whole time.
No, actually, I do have a pretty good memory because it was just myself and one other person, a colleague that I still do research with. Our first, the grant program itself has evolved since 10 years ago. And so we were actually doing research on a traditional textbook and students' experiences with it, and then their experience with one of the few OERs that actually existed in American government at the time. So at that midpoint between semesters, we had already gathered our data and collected our data on student experiences with the control. And so we were just, at this point, we had implemented the survey for the OER class, the pre-survey, and then started that, and so we were in a pretty good solid position at the midpoint.
Very cool. Todd, how about you and your team or your teams?
So our first grant was the lowest hanging fruit, in which we just implemented some new open source materials into some of our classrooms, but we also were doing some research along with it. So we had most of our sections that were still using a traditional textbook, and then about half of our sections that were using these pre-existing online materials. And so in terms of implementing it into the course, we were right on target. We were ahead of time on it as well, because the purpose of the grant was just to implement the new materials, and we had those prepared before the semester began. But part of the work came then towards the end of the semester in comparing and gathering survey results from students about their experiences with both the new stuff and the open source materials, and also assessing, how good they were and how effective they were compared to the pre-existing expensive textbook. But then as we move forward, I started to write this down, and it worked. It's sort of been how it's supposed to be. The first grant, we were practically finished by the midpoint. The second grant, we were barely started by the midpoint. And like Rebecca, I have some other things to maybe say about that later. But then on our third grant, we were pretty much on target. And on our fifth grant, we were nearly complete by the midpoint because we've had so much experience doing it, I think.
Wow. Really cool. We can definitely hold some ideas for later questions. That's totally fine. And Soma, how about you and your team?
For us, I have a mixed experience, and also like Todd, as he mentioned, that when it was our first grant, we were creating everything from scratch. So at that time, we were not able to really come up with a lot of resources for the students to be used, but we created some. And in that time, we were trying to figure out what could be the best way, what could be the other ways. And we were gathering informal surveys from students, what will be useful, which helped us a lot. And then by the time this is our fifth grant, we also have evolved. We have learned a lot along the way. And this grant, our current grant is we are improving on our previous resource, which was our second grant. So we are kind of on the target of our midpoint. So what we are doing parallelly, we are developing resources, and we are using those in the labs with the students. And my team mates are doing very great. This semester, I'm not teaching that course, but our two other team members, they are using it. And then we are doing that mix and match from the previous resource versus the new ones.
All right. So we're going to go to the second question. This is about the barriers that you might have ran into as you got to the midpoint of these projects. What caught you off guard? I'm going to jump one over and start with Julie this time.
Thank you. I don't know if it necessarily caught me off guard, but I was just still learning at that time about all the concept of OERs and what resources were out there. Like we knew that there weren't a lot of actual full American government textbooks, but it actually surprised me how much other material was out there, but it was in so many different places. So there were repositories, but they were kind of piecemeal and those types of things. So I think that's probably what surprised me, that there were resources out there, but it was very time consuming for faculty to go out and try to search them down as well. And another issue too that we discovered, and again, probably not necessarily catching us off guard, was just at that time there weren't ancillaries, and it was okay because my colleague and I had been teaching this class for over a decade anyway. But I can't imagine like a GA or fresh out of graduate school first semester someone teaching the class and not and wanting to use an OER to benefit our students, but not having the resources that we get from the traditional paid textbooks. So that caught us a little bit off guard, and we really asked, how can we help not only people at our career stage, but those younger faculty that are coming out and graduate assistants and so on.
Makes sense. How about you, Todd?
I've got a few bullet points here. And the first one I'll say is, and maybe some of the listeners today are experiencing this right now, but the initial excitement of winning the grant wears off pretty quickly. And that caught me off guard because I think for many of us, this is a labor of love. This is something that we're doing. We probably could have earned a lot more money working for a private sector textbook company to produce this stuff than we would have through ALG. And so it's great that we're, doing this for humanity, but that excitement does wear off. And so, there was a lot of excitement in writing the grant. Not all of it, but the fun part, was really inspiring to sort of think about how we can make this better and really serve our students. But then the semester just bangs you in the face and you have all of your committee meetings and things like that. And so, much like beginning of the year, New Year's resolutions, your timeline probably gets thrown off very quickly, very fast. And so if anybody out there is feeling that at their midpoint, don't feel like you're alone in that, because especially with the first couple of grants, it's very common. And this sort of falls to the bottom of your to-do list. So, at the midpoint, it's a good idea to just not beat yourself up, but to restart and rejuvenate. The other thing is that in my case, each of my colleagues and I had very different work styles. We'd known each other for quite a while. We did committee work. So we thought that I think, were in sync with everything that we did. But when it came to writing, we hadn't really written much before. And I have one colleague that just could not keep to the page limits. And so our most difficult grant was actually writing a textbook from scratch. And he or she, not going to say, but was like double the page limit, and then not hitting deadlines because they were working so arduously on this and going way over the top probably of what they needed to. And then another colleague who had a view of the textbook that it shouldn't really contain all the material, that it should just contain basics, and that the lecturer would be responsible for filling in, the lecture material. And the rest of the team was like, no, not at all. Students should be able to look things up in the textbook that they didn't get in the lecture. And so that led to some uncomfortable conversations. And, it's not all that different from working with students. Let's be honest, we're all people. So that caught me off guard a little bit too. We all have PhDs, so we all have training. I kind of thought that we would all have a similar method and expectations for the excellence of writing and things like that, which not all of us did. So then some of us had to edit each other more than we would have expected. And then there's summer fatigue as well, depending upon your dates. You may think that you're going to get a ton done in the summer or in that interim between semesters, and maybe you will. but you're going to have the same fatigue that you would normally have, and family issues kind of jump in there as well. So don't be surprised if that happens. Sorry if that was too long, but that's mine.
No, that's fine. Soma, how about you?
What I can say that two things I can say. One is the overexcitement, as Todd said, that of getting that grant and then thinking about, well, we will be able to do a lot, as much as possible. We have all of these wild dream that how much we can add. And then after a point, I have to realize that no way it is possible in that time frame. We have to make some priorities, what could be included. And then the next thing is the work pressure, because this is what we are doing on top of our regular teaching schedule. And we have a heavy teaching load. All the grants I worked on, all of us, we are primarily teaching faculties. So we have really, really huge teaching load, and we have labs. So labs also demand a lot of time. So that sometimes becomes challenging by the time that the midtime is there. The midpoint gives us a reminder where we are, but also sometimes it scares us. Oh my God, it's already the midpoint, and then maybe this work I need to do again, or I have to review or so. So those are the things I will say that becomes sometimes a little bit challenging.
All right. And Rebecca, how about you?
Yeah, so many things are coming to mind, and they're kind of blending with perhaps future conversations on like recommendations. So I'll try to limit that perspective right now so that we can stay on point. But I have a few things. Coordinating meetings. When we were developing our first year writing content, we were coordinating with other institutions. So we were working one semester with KSU and with UGA on course content development and curriculum. And coordinating meetings between such large groups was difficult. So one thing that we did was we split it up into smaller groups. So not everyone is having to meet. So kind of coordinating people who are working on similar content and meeting with smaller breakout groups throughout week during a time that worked for everyone was something that we found surprising. We weren't really anticipating that. Also, spending money that we're getting from the grant. So some people who have a 12-month contract, there is, you know, perhaps they are going to a conference or something like that, and they're not going to use all of their allotted money. So just kind of keep track of how the budget is being spent, and if you need to reallocate money. So just keep that in mind. Also, some people stop participating. They get overwhelmed. They're, looking at other things. Perhaps they just get off track. So just keeping everybody on track is something that, you didn't really think you were, having to budget into your own workload, but it is very important. This also applies to any student workers that you bring on board, just kind of, facilitating, communicating with them, making sure that they're all, on track is something that maybe you're not really budgeting into your particular workload, but it is a part of it. And also, if you're doing an IRB study, just keeping track of consent forms. And if you have a lot of dual enrollment students who perhaps are not adults, you have to get parents to sign off, and just managing the paperwork and pre-surveys and post-surveys, things like that is just an extra step in the process of things to keep in mind and coordinate and communicate about.
Yeah, I had never even considered dual enrollment and IRB. That's
A
something that,
lot.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a big challenge. Yeah.
All right. We'll go to the third question from here, and I think folks have been anticipating this one. And this is, what advice do you have for new grant teams for the second half of these projects? I'm going to jump one again. So we'll start off with Todd.
I'm allowed this one. I would just say regroup a little bit. And if you didn't before, like To echo Rebecca's point, I didn't think I was going to have to take the role of leadership nearly as much as I did. I didn't want that. I didn't expect it. I just planned on respecting my colleagues' time and effort. But on the other hand, my name was on that grant and it had to get done, and I'm not complaining about my colleagues. Everything is great. We have a great relationship and we've been successful. But in the interim, right, to get to that point, it can be really frustrating. But rather than just sit and stew about it, I would say that the best thing you can do is to maybe, if things aren't moving along the way that you would have liked them to, set a weekly or monthly or bi-monthly or whatever meeting and maybe insist on it being in person. That really worked for us one time when we were kind of stuck on something and we just set a time where we were going to be there. And in the end, it turned into something similar to what I had in my PhD program, which maybe a lot of you had, which was sort of a support group for each other. And so we didn't necessarily rail on each other about like, you got to hit this deadline, but we would, we knew that we were going to report in and talk about where we were and what we were doing and ask each other if we needed help on something. And so that worked out great. I reserved a room and I said, it's going to be writing time. We didn't do that much writing, but we did a lot of commiserating and planning, and that worked great for us. So that's my only advice.
Very cool. Soma, how about you?
What I will say that for the new grant teams, it's good that this meeting is being organized. And one recommendation I will have, if it is a team, which most of the ALG grants, that's how we see that a team has applied for that. Please do not always put all the leading responsibilities on the PI because others are also the team members. And you are also getting some benefit because it is the research work and the resource creation of the resources. So sometimes also take some initiative if you see that the PI got caught up with some other work or sickness or family matter. Please step in and take initiative to again redistribute the work or sending the reminder or so. That I will strongly recommend that. And also looking at periodically the proposal and the guideline, what you did put in that grant, so that, as Todd said, not to go over through the double or triple of the page limits or so, because that becomes another workload for other team members to readjust it.
Thank you. How about Rebecca?
So some advice I have for y'all is one, you're just going to love it. It's just such a wonderful opportunity. And at least at GGC, we're really celebrated for this type of participation. And it made my life more meaningful at work. So I learned new things. It just, the benefits of engaging in this activity just outweighed any of the hassles by far. That's why I also, like Todd, keep doing it. So some advice I would give as a PI is pick your team wisely. Don't pick on, oh, I like this person, she's my friend, or he's my friend, or he helped me one time, and bring people on who maybe you're fraternizing with. Really pick people based on the skills they're going to bring to the table. Yeah, you want to get along with them so you can communicate effectively, of course, but also you want to bring this multidisciplinary team you're going to work with who can do things you can't do. You don't want to duplicate your own strengths. And I think that could lead to some tension later on, is if people have different ideas about things. But if you pick your team wisely and then structure and delegate very clearly, like, this is your role, this is your sphere, and let them take charge of that, that's pretty cool. But you have to be very organized. So think, as you're applying for the grant, really think how you're going to organize this. Who are you going to pick? What are their strengths? What duties are there you're going to delegate to them? And in terms of that organization, I just emphasize work ahead. Just get as much done as possible. And for things that you're going to have to do later, set up calendar due dates, not just invites, but due dates of when you want people in their different, sub teams, when you want them to have certain work completed, so you can build off of it for the grant. So due dates also, can coordinate with emailing the team about the due dates in advance, saying, remember, this is coming up, and set up check-in meetings. So you can just talk about, okay, where are they? What do they need to do? Just holds people, brings their attention back to this grant work because they have a million other things we all do. So those would be the things that I would recommend.
All right. Julie, how about you?
I think some of y'all have alluded to it previously, but basically give yourself some grace with your work. You can't do everything. This isn't going to be a perfect project. You're probably, as you're working on this, you're going to go down rabbit holes and think of other research questions you want to do. You know what? Save that for your next grant. Because that's one of the great things about this program is that we can build on this, and we've got some people in here who are building on their great work. So make a note of that. Have those conversations with your teammates if you do start to kind of think, hey, maybe we need to look at this or look at that, and that kind of goes back to what you all were saying about rereading your grant application, staying focused. Reach out to our friends in the system office. They're there to help us if you have any questions or any concerns. If you have an ambassador on campus or other colleagues on campus that have been through the ALG program before, reach out to them, reach out to your Center for Teaching and Learning, whatever it may be called, for advice, feedback. They're great about that as well. Colleagues in the discipline at other institutions. I find that at conferences, especially conferences that focus on teaching and learning, people love to talk about OERs. So that's a good network. And then if you haven't started thinking about conferences, and maybe this is segueing into the next question a little bit, start maybe looking at that and planning out the next year and planning out your research agenda with this data beyond what we're doing for ALG and submitting to them.
Thanks so much. Yeah. Oh, okay. Nikita is going to be looking for questions here in the chat, but also, so after this next question, be prepared to either ask that way or to unmute when we open up the floor. So the last question here for the panel is, was there anything interesting that happened after the project was done? Because folks are going to be ending this project mostly at the end of spring 2026. What could they anticipate, expect, or look towards? And I'm going to start this time with Soma.
Well, here for, of course, we need to have that mindset that it is not limited to this project only, because there is always room for improvement, having the conversation. And for our first grant, what we did, like we involve students to get the feedback. Okay, because this resource is for students, so to getting their perspective will help us to improve. And before we publish the final product, we did make some modifications based on the students' feedback, which helped us a lot. And then for one of our other grants, one of our team members, she was PI at that time, I was co-PI. What she did, like once we finished that product, she individually collected information from other institutes, the biology department, and reached out to them, giving the resource that this is what we have developed. As Julie has said, that there are so many, and all of us, we know that there are so many things around in the internet, right? But sometimes it becomes difficult to collect what we really need, or what will be a good thing, or what will match with what we are doing or teaching in our class. So she reached out to the department heads to requesting sharing the resources. I think that helps. And then going beyond that, like we have to limit our capacity into that, say, 1 year. But there is always something in our wish list, in our bucket list. So that could be something in our agenda. What can we do? What could have done differently to make it better? So this will be some of the after project ideas, and of course, presenting it in the different forum. that helps, that influences others to think about certain projects, these scholarship of teaching and learning, that get out of the fear and try something by yourself, which will be not only helpful for your own department or institute, but some others beyond that level as well.
Very cool. Let's go to Rebecca.
So the end of the project is for us really when it kind of becomes more meaningful and we apply what we've learned. So it's not the end of it. It's really now, okay, you're looking at the data, you're getting the information about what worked, what didn't, and then you're communicating that to the rest of the people who teach in the subject. That kind of leads to number two, one of the number two questions, which was, what caught you off guard? What caught me off guard when the project ended was coming to the rest of, let's say, the English department saying, hey, this resulted in a 20% pass rate increase. And these are the things that worked. And then having other faculty not want to hear what you've done or want to change what they are doing to benefit their students. That's a little frustrating because people kind of get stuck in their ways and they don't necessarily want to change things. So think about the messaging. How are you going to deliver what you've learned so that other people can benefit from it as well in terms of teaching? And I know people do this differently in English. It's like herding cats, right? But some people are more open to standardization. We're moving into that with the ALG projects because it just works for students. We have been so lucky to have a lot of team members and collaboratively work on presentations, conferences, even a publication that we're close to finishing. And when you're done, you also think about, okay, just as others have noted, when you're in the project yourself, you start to think about, oh, this would be cool if we did this there. And so it's also the point of expanding the project. How are you going to build upon sort of the structure that you've built here to make it more comprehensive and apply to other areas? And that's what's really addictive and exciting, is seeing a project that you started, you implement it, you let it, you get to see the data. Hopefully it worked or it improved or you learned some good things, and then thinking about how to build upon that growth as well. It's really cool. So, I'm glad you're all here and getting to experience some of that as well. It's just exciting.
Very, very good points. Julie, how about you?
Celebrate your victories, obviously, and share them widely, and not just with like the SOTL literature and the SOTL community, also too within your discipline. And probably most of our disciplines actually have teaching and learning journals focus. That's where our article was published on my first project. Also too, don't forget to toot your own horn. This is student success work. And we know that student success is important to all of us, but it's especially important when we're doing our yearly evaluations. So, make sure to highlight that in your work and how you've contributed and have that data like you all have been sharing and stuff. So just remember that, the work you've done so far is great. You've contributed to the literature, you've contributed to our understanding, and keep it up, and keep your eye open for that next project and that next grant.
All right. And Todd, thank you for bearing with us this whole time while also having a cold. You can cap this off with what when would you expect after the project would be done?
Thanks for saying that, Jeff. I'm sorry if I'm blowing my nose on camera here, but at least I'm at home, which is a great thing about the technology, right? In terms of the way you framed the question initially, we did have a couple of surprises. And so just to repeat that, we started by doing the lowest level of grant, which was just implementing somebody else's open source materials. And then we took the leap to author our own brand new textbook, which was a huge project and one that was very daunting. But again, when you're teaching the same course multiple times, that wasn't what I set out to do with my academic career, but that's the job that I landed. And, you can either be bitter about that or you can dive into it. And I love the way that Rebecca framed things, right? That we're delivering things that are improving students' experiences. And what we didn't expect was that our textbook would become, and this sounds so weird to say, but so widely used, not just in Georgia, but, and you've seen all the data, Jeff, but I think we're up to 160,000 downloads or something like that, which is insane. Um, and it's being used in across the world in multiple countries. And so I was not expecting that. We had a scholar that approached us from Korea and asked for permission to translate it into Korean, and so it's been translated into Korean as well. But leading into the aftermath, I would also echo the idea that it's good to celebrate it a little bit. It's tempting to just, once you get to the end, to just, once you file that report, to just think of it as a checkbox, that you've done. But it's important to talk about it, because when you're inside of it, you think everybody else on campus or in your department knows what you're doing, but they don't. And I have no idea why my colleagues in history, I'm in a history and geography department, I have no idea why they aren't applying for these grants over and over again. It makes no sense to me. I mean, many of us have benefited, I guess, from less competition, but they should absolutely be doing it. And I've offered my help. I have one colleague who I think is going to apply in the next semester. Um, but yeah, I sort of lost my train of thought there, but celebrate it a little bit, and then talk about it. And I guess the other thing I would say is that sometimes your chair or your dean who signed off on this may not be fully aware of the amount of work that you've put into it. And so you may have to do some you may have to have some conversations about that to make sure. I mean, none of us like to toot our own horns. Like, as academics, I think we don't do that probably, but it is important for your own career advancement as well, to do that a little bit with both your chair and with your other colleagues who aren't involved with the grant, to let them know what's going on, and also with your dean if you have that opportunity. And then the last point I'll make, and this is something that we're talking about right now, is that we've had one colleague retire that's a part of this grant. Another one is about to, unexpectedly, sort of. And Darrell and I, the co-PIs, we're both full professors, and we need some younger faculty members to take over. If this thing is going to be truly sustainable across time, there needs to be somebody to come in, not necessarily at our institution even, probably somebody with a little bit more energy and that's younger, to take it through the next steps. And we have to be willing to let go of that, which I perfectly am, if we can find the right people. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to open up the panel to these questions that we're going to get. We already have one, and I think it's a really good one for sustainability. So chime in if you've got anything to say about it. So Denise Tucker says, when dealing with setting up a course and dealing with technology, what advice do you have when you have to adapt to changes in technology? How do you keep the momentum once you've made those changes?
I would just say that in my case, we were very mindful of that, because our institution has changed its learning system multiple times. And, we used to have that thing called Flash once upon a time, right? That disappeared. So I don't know if this is the best advice for everybody, but we kept it fairly simple. And so our end result is just a PDF. We didn't try to make an interactive textbook to compete with, those really cool, flashy things that a lot of the for-profit textbooks have created. And it's partly for that reason.
I can say one thing, like when we first created the grant, our library was very supportive of this work, and it was hosted on Galileo. There's a PDF. At that time, we created interactive versions. And then we thought, okay, all the data is there, like how many people are using, what are the other places being, these resources being used other than the Augusta University or so. And so I didn't, that was a mistake on my side, because my collaborator, she moved to a different university. And then after a point, library has changed their platform to hosting these resources. And I lost all the data because I didn't save it separately. So I will strongly recommend periodically everybody make sure that you back up your data to see how these resources are being used.
Oh, Nikita, you had a raised hand.
I did, but I didn't want to take from the panelists if Rebecca or Julie had any suggestions for this keeping up with technology before I answered.
Yeah, again, there's so much that I don't know technologically. So when you're bringing on your team, bring in those experts. We have someone, we work with the Office of Academic Assessment. Tom Lilly is our go-to, and Rebecca Cooper also is part of the team. She also helps us organize things. And, without them, we couldn't do this. So bring in those experts who know that technology so they can help.
Yeah, and Julie, did you want to add anything before I added some suggestions?
No, go ahead. I would just ditto what everybody said.
Well, I was definitely going to go.
I have one point to add. I'm sorry I interrupted. I agree with Rebecca, bring the experts, but make sure before including them in the teamwork that how busy are they? Because they also, as a part, they also have some commitment to work on these. And sometimes if they have too many other responsibilities or they are a big thing in the university, then it becomes a little difficult to collaborate and get the things from their side. So that is one of the challenges we also faced. We wanted a cross-discipline, interdisciplinary collaboration, but that has become a little bit challenging to finish the product in the timeline or to come up, present it the way we were looking for.
Indeed. And so I wanted to just comment actually to support all of you guys, especially what someone was saying and what Rebecca said as well. Collaboration, I think, is the key to dealing with advancements in technology, making sure you keep your data. Ask the experts. Rebecca mentioned earlier about having people on your team that have skills you don't, right? And so definitely talking to your technology team at your school to see what advice they might have, to see what changes might be coming up. We also have partners that can help you depending on the kind of project you have, such as UNG Press, who kind of manages these kinds of changes on your behalf. So even though we're in the midpoint of the project, it is not too late, I think, depending on your project, to invite others in with that level of expertise to help you kind of avoid those pitfalls later on. So reach out.
So we had another question from Caroline Hansen, and it's a follow-up to what Rebecca was talking about. Any advice for overcoming or dealing with the resistance from your colleagues on adopting new materials once you've gotten all that done?
So I was just typing up a response, but I'll read it again. So even when we show the data, like, wow, this is 20% pass rate, and for our classes, they're gateway, you need 1102 to take other courses down the line. So it can really stop people from progressing. And so if you're like, more students are, succeeding with this, it's still so frustrating when they say no. So we're going to try again by walking them through the product, the textbook, the online template that they can upload and use. And we're also thinking of creating perhaps maybe stripping out some content and letting them build in some of their own, but still keeping the integrity of the framework, just so that it's a little more flexible for people who are kind of want to teach to their strengths. So we're contemplating a lot of other things, keeping what really helped students and what worked, and perhaps being more flexible in how people want to personalize the content. The other thing is that we really push, hey, participating in a pilot and testing this out is going to be great for your annual review. And so we're keeping in touch with people who are reviewing people's annual reports and seeing like, okay, they participated in this pilot, and that counts like a lot of like service work, and also counts in teaching. So they know that they're going to get rewarded for trying it out. Once they try it out, which is a huge ask, but bless, like we're so happy people did this. Just thank goodness for those people. They tend to keep it. So they're like, damn, this is actually good. It's just that moment of thinking about it. But once they try it out, they're like, this actually is, it makes my job easier. And that's the point. It's like you build this to make people's lives easier to teach it, and also to have more success for the students. So those are two things that once people try it, they do like it, but just getting them to try it is kind of the hurdle.
I think too, some of the resistance, at least for me, to new things comes from a place of fear. Like I might not understand how to implement this or use this new software or whatever it may be. So making sure that they know that they are supported when they try this new activity, I think is important as well. And I think that's building on what Rebecca was saying.
I can't agree with that more. I think a lot of the resistance is trying, and we have a couple people in our pilot this semester. That was one thing we did a little differently. We didn't get enough participation in the fall, so we extended it out to the spring and kind of pushed more participation, and we did get it. So we're going to have 2 semesters of data sets that will help us see what worked, what didn't, what we could do in the future. But people who are participating are people we're finding out don't really know how to use the skills that maybe we thought everybody knew. So there is a lot of support that's built into that. And also you just have to get in the mindset rather, that faculty who are testing out your product are going to need support, and not to be annoyed by that. Just realize that, like, you know, you're doing it, this is a mission, you're doing it, it is for students, it is to help people teach better, more effectively. So you kind of have to just not get irritated by maybe the same person asking 10 questions in 3 days on stuff. It's a little challenging, but I think it's good, and that person will be more in command of how to teach the content through the methods we've created down the line.
All right. So Dr. Ceylani, good question here. Especially, I think this was for Todd. What do you think is the crucial factor about your work that made it appealing to learners, to readers, to instructors that wound up with so much usage?
I feel bad for mentioning that data point now. It's such a humble brag, but honestly, we weren't expecting it. But I think 2 things. In our case, we wrote the book specifically for our students at GGC, and GGC, for those of you in Georgia that don't know, is an access institution. The barriers to gaining entry are very low. And a lot of the examples from the other, even the paid textbooks, which are very popular, just maybe a little too far out there for our students to connect to. And it's a geography class, so of course we have examples from all over the world, but we included a lot more of examples that included Atlanta urban planning, for example, right? Which is one of the concepts we do. When we talked about migration, we talked about the suburban experience with migration, which connects to a lot of our students. We're in suburban Atlanta. So maybe some of that, but I think more than anything, in terms of my or our team's writing skills or attractiveness of the book, is the fact that it was a full package, thanks to the grants here. So it was incorporation of other outside activities and events first, and then it was the textbook second. And the textbook, if I'm being honest, when I reread it now, the first edition, we have a second and third edition now, wasn't awesome. There were typos and there were mistakes and things like that, and so we've improved it. But we also got the ancillary grant, and we made all of our PowerPoints and everything and test bank questions, which some of us weren't comfortable with, freely available. So it's just like the packet you get from from whoever, when you get it, you get everything. And so I think it's because it was plug and play. That's probably the single biggest reason, if I'm being honest.
I think listening to y'all, relevance is definitely a part of it too. Relevance when something hasn't yet proliferated in the open world. So when someone was talking about why you would make a rabbit atlas for anatomy, it doesn't make sense until you know that there was like a cat shortage and everybody made that pivot. So it wouldn't just be Soma's class that winds up switching to rabbits. It's just about everybody. And having an open educational resource for that at that time puts a ton of eyes on it immediately, because you've got a high demand for something that wasn't yet there.
Actually, that's right. And we got like a department-wide collaboration, like people were willing to use it, and all the resources we have developed that is being used by our either the anatomy physiology faculty or the biology faculty. So from that point, we really, our collaboration worked very well.
All right. We are scarily on time, so much so. Before we go, does anybody have on mic questions for our grantee panel before we wind up taking a break?
Are you saying we're hitting our mark at our midpoint check-in for this meeting?
Yeah.
And while
Okay.
you're gathering your thoughts for question, I just want to make a quick comment as well to some of the things that we've mentioned. One, regarding the resistance from faculty, as well as the comment about why maybe an OER got downloaded so many times. And I think this answer could help field both of those questions. And that is, don't forget, again, to toot your own horn just a little bit. When sharing your project with other faculty, mentioning how impactful it is, not only to student success, but also to their own promotion, their teaching and tenure and promotion. Jeff put a link in the chat for suggestions about how this work can fit into those discussions. But whereas it would be just a wonderful world if everything we do had a students first focus, that'd be awesome. And we just did it because we love students so much, and maybe we do, but also it does benefit the faculty member, it benefits the staff and the team. And so being able to mention that as something they should be proud of might be helpful as well to get some of that resistance down. And also sharing that, Todd, that first iteration of the book didn't get the 160,000 downloads, right? Like it took a few continuous improvement grants after that. And so that's the kind of work that is getting the recognition and should indeed be included in your tenure and promotion. So keep that in mind as we're going through the midpoint as well.
Yeah, and as much as I can't stand being on social media most of the time, I'm kind of annoying if you try to contact me on LinkedIn, because I'll be like a month before I go back into there. I have seen folks sharing their stuff on LinkedIn, and then I realize, oh, wow. So if something makes the news and you're sharing it around there, you might get some extra eyes on it at that point. So I think I wanted to look for this article, but I thought there was an article on the Atlas, and I just cannot find it.
Okay, I will send the link to you.
Oh, okay. So yeah, if you have any more questions, or if you come up with them a little bit later on, send them, email them over. We can always route them to the proper folks. And I want to thank our panel so much for sharing their experiences, their ideas, their advice. It's been super helpful for everybody here. And we are going to move on to a 10-minute break. So let's come back at, I don't want to do an 08, that's kind of messy. We'll come back at 2:10, and y'all will be, and I mean the whole group, will be sharing your experiences somewhat asynchronously using a Padlet, and that'll be a little bit nicer than the old breakouts where you had to kind of do a lot of technological management. So I will see you all at 2:10. Thank you. So I'll just say in the chat that we're back to, just in case folks aren't able to hear. So we are back here. And the next slide is all about our collaborative session. So in the past, what we would do is do a whole bunch of breakout sessions and ask a big set of questions that our panelists would all help out with. And that worked okay, but it was a lot of technical finagling around, and then hopefully some information gathering, and then folks would report back. Instead, this time around, what we're going to do is share our thoughts on one collaborative page on a Padlet. So I have the clickable link in here on the slide. I've also got a QR code if you want to enter through your phone. I'm going to post the Padlet link on the chat as well. And in a second, I'm going to switch this over and do it full screen on here so that we can all see the Padlet in our window too. I'll let you get to the Padlet here before we do that. You might have seen in the past, we did this on Poll Everywhere. We did this on Mentimeter. Mentimeter especially has a response limit each time, and it's not that big of a response limit, so it wound up kicking people out, and that did not work out so well. But lately, and we kind of picked this up from the Open Education Conference and Open Education Association folks, these collaborative Padlet sessions have allowed us to all share our thoughts without having to go off mic and talk that way. All right, so I'm going to start moving over to share the window. There it is. All right. So the first question, and this is the one that we're going to look at first, are the project barriers and challenges that you're encountering on your own project? So this isn't a question for the panel. This is a question for you. What are the barriers and challenges you're running into in completing your projects? So go right ahead and click the add comment thing here, and you can type stuff in here. It doesn't matter if you have an anonymous or non-anonymous account, totally fine either way. One person said, yep, the IRB process for research, yep, complexity, lengthiness,
And Jeff, I'll just interrupt here just a moment, just to let you all know that it's not just a, a question where we're gathering your feedback. We also want to capture what we do want your feedback, because we want to capture areas where we may be able to improve this process for you going forward, but also for you to be able to identify things that you can share with each other right now live that will actually help some of these barriers and challenges you're experiencing as we go forward. So we're still looking for our panelists to chime in where you may see comments you can make to help people out along the way, but also we are gathering it for future support.
Thank you. Finding appropriate resources on the particular topic at hand, on AI ethics for students written at a level that students can understand. A collaborator left, so they have to start over. Turnover is super hard to manage on these projects for sure. Staying on track with the timeline set for the project. In the past, we had a lot of folks who were like, I really wish I had a timeline that I could refer to. Now it's much more of a mandate that everybody has a good timeline and a good planned out amount of work. So if you look at the Round 29 application, looks a lot different than it used to. There's a lot more tables in there, and that's in order to make sure that everybody's at the same level of organization, or at least around the same level. Finding time for scholarship with a heavy teaching load. Yeah, absolutely. Timing, making sure they're hitting deadlines, but because things come up, yeah. budgeted for specific licenses, but providers changed and the budget is strained. Yeah, that kind of thing can change around. Oh man. Yet the cost of purchasing licenses increased inside of budgets. Shifting in workload since receiving the grant makes it hard to carve the timeout. Yep. IRB for sure. Changes with virtual machine VMware that caused changes in the new system. We have to change over to a new platform. Yeah, and someone's saying the IRB definitely takes a long time. Same with Dr. K's. Some scheduling conflicts too. Yep, the ALG. Yep, there was an ALG project that's integrated with study abroad. Separating those three moving parts, doing one after the other, building slowly, would be better than doing all of them at the same time. Yeah, that is a good point. How to integrate specific interactive platforms like DataCamp Classroom. Copyright issues on images and graphs from seemingly public institutions. Yeah, you would think that some of these things are open source and sometimes they aren't. And often what you'll see is a page at a public institution is sharing an image, but they don't own the rights to that image. They're just sharing it because they think, well, I'm using it for educational purposes, so I can. So they throw it out there. And then you realize too late that it's kind of copyrighted by like 3 degrees of Kevin Bacon by the time you get there. Finding a home for audio and video files. Yeah. And one that allows you to satisfy accessibility standards for sure. See the positive effects of the transformations. That helps. Now coming up with the plans for sustainability can be challenging. Oh yeah.
And as Jeff is kind of summarizing these for us, and I see some others are going on to our questions number 2 and 3, which is completely fine. Is anyone on our panel seeing some things that they've encountered before that they may want to share some insight about how some of these challenges can be addressed right now, real time? And while I pose that question, I will just mention that if you're having timeline issues and personnel changes that are really impacting you greatly here at the Midpoint, and you're a little concerned, this is the time actually to reach out to Jeff and myself to see if there's any shifts that need to be made in your project, amendments or things like that that we may need to tackle ahead of time before we get to the final report due.
Yeah, so if there are specific questions about your project that have to do with some big changes, email those over for sure.
So yeah, if our panelists have any suggestions for tackling some of these challenges now, that'd be helpful. Just chime right in. And we're all finding out accessibility is one big topic and very time consuming. It is indeed. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in the next steps and reminders. So definitely pay attention there.
I'll just chime in to say that I've dealt with a lot of these issues being mentioned, and there's no magic wand for any of them. They're just, these are the thorny issues that you guys are submitting here.
And Todd, you mentioned that your first project, you guys were on time by the midpoint. The second project, you hadn't even started quite yet, so you're a little bit of a panic. And the third project, you were back on time. So these challenges, do you find that they show up every time? You just kind of it shows up differently? Like, what can you say about the anyone who will be thinking, once I get through this, I'm never doing it again kind of thought?
I mean, I would go back to my previous statement that we've kept our technology fairly simple for that reason. And we've used, even though they're not quite as exciting, we've used a lot of Wikipedia images and images that are much more safe. But then that causes problems if we've written sections around that image It's been very difficult and time consuming to replace it, or do we have to rewrite that or just throw it out completely? So we kind of start with the ground level a little bit more than we did before. And we had a similar problem with student workers at one point, and so we stopped relying on student workers instead. And this is terrible, but we don't pay workers. We instead find highly motivated students that would like to have this on their CV, that they worked on a textbook or that they actually edited and authored, to avoid that issue. So those may not be the answers that people want to hear, and I feel badly for that, because the idea is that you can't hire student workers, but we had the exact same problem. Is that when we had technical problems that we just decided to stop using entirely as well.
So
I
even
will
here
say
in the
though,
go ahead. I was
Go
gonna say
ahead.
even here in the
sorry.
midpoint, keeping it simple is a good answer. Just starting to reduce it and keeping it simple is a kind of a summary there to what Todd was saying. Sorry, Rebecca, I just wanted to mention that part.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was gonna just respond to Todd's comment because we're at the same institution, and I can't, I don't know what it's like at other institutions, but at least at GGC, I think they've corrected some things with hiring now. Our HR department, let's just face it, it needed some work, and I think they're getting better at some things, but the student worker, I don't want to dissuade people from at least attempting to hire
I'm
them
glad you're
because
saying that.
it's,
Yeah, I don't
yeah,
want to discourage anybody from doing it either. It should be an important part of the process. You're right, Rebecca. Go ahead.
yeah, yeah. And just sort of advocate for that because wow, what a great line on their CV or resume to have worked on a grant. So the students we've brought on, they, I've written recommendations for them for grad school, different things like that. And so it's really professionalization experience for students that's just as important as the content we're creating. So, but I know it is tricky. Again, also, I can't underemphasize, check your budget. See where you're at. Did you miscalculate something? Did something cost less than what you were anticipating? How can you know, redirect those funds to a different area that would help your grant, or a different person who maybe is traveling and needs a little more funding to make that happen? I just spent, the last couple days reallocating funds in the system. And if you don't know how to do that, just contact the person that's overseeing the grants and just ask, because I met with people. I was like, I need you to help me. Please meet with me. And they walked me through it. So if you don't know something, the problem is not going to go away. And you don't want to be at the end of the semester where you're giving back money that you were awarded. You really do want to find, effective ways to allocate that to your institution.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And before we move on to the next question, because we want to make sure we're keeping the time, but for our panelists, as you're looking through some of these challenges, and Todd mentioned it, there's not really an easy answer to them. And a lot of them show up at different times in different ways at different projects. But knowing that there's not an easy answer for a lot of them, but they are still challenges, is there anything that the panelists can say about the project still being worth it, even though overcoming some of these challenges can be quite quite a challenge? But speaking to overcoming some of them and pressing through, if we could just talk a little bit about that. Maybe just provide some encouragement while we're here looking at the list.
I'm just here, so I'll just speak again. I am more marketable as a worker in a more dynamic fields, in addition to academia, because of my experience working on this grant. I learned things that I wouldn't have learned elsewhere. It kept me plugged in. It energized me. I don't know. I just felt like at this point in my life, I'm in my 50s, having this experience working on grant work like this just shows me how much more and in different ways I have to give. So it was just personally just very rewarding. I don't want to underestimate that yeah, it's challenging, but it's also, if you like problem solving and you enjoy meeting challenges, I just found it so interesting and engaging, and wasn't like, oh gosh, why did I ever do this? I didn't. I was just, leading something like this is just very empowering. And I uncovered some strengths about, myself that I didn't know before this.
I'll echo the same and simply say that this, when I first started this, it was just sort of a little side project that it was annoying to me that I didn't really want to take part in, because we're not trained to do this in our Research One institutions where we do our PhDs. But I absolutely changed my mindset on it. And the other thing that I will add is that unlike other grants from the NIH or a million other places, those places are, once you submit it, you're just lost in the system. You got to do everything on your own. But one thing that's great about this is it is really I mean, this is probably my 80th encounter with Jeff across the years, back from when we used to meet in person in, I don't remember the institution, Central Georgia,
Yeah, Middle Georgia.
Middle Georgia, right?
Yep.
So not to go back in the memories of time, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that they are very responsive. That the two of them have never not responded to an email that I sent them. So they probably won't say this out loud, but I'll tell you that in my experience, even if you're having an issue, if you reach out to them, if they can't handle it specifically, they probably have a wealth of experience where somebody else has experienced something that you're experiencing, and that they will respond to you, unlike those other much larger grant giving institutions.
Well, I'll definitely say, like, do reach out, and if we do not respond, that is atypical, and please do get back to us, like circle back to it, because sometimes all of a sudden we'll just wind up on break and there's an avalanche of email and we think we've answered your email and we didn't, and it's gone. So do recheck in if we wind up not able to get back to you. Email is a weirdly good and standard tool, and also inefficient at the same time. It's weird.
Indeed. And thank you, Todd, for that. We appreciate that. That is the kind of environment we're trying to offer here. And so with that in mind, we can move on to the second question if Jeff wants to kind of go over some of the results we have here, because this is where we want to really pay attention.
So we asked what you ran into, what were your difficulties. The next thing is, how can we help? How can your departments help better? How can your institutions help better? And that's part of this. The first one, we're going to be going over a little bit of the accessibility thing, but also, it could be a day-long training. It could be the guides that we have as well could help on this. So yeah, we will be going over the accessibility thing shortly. Thank you about the support from the ALG. Unmet hiring needs in our programs, so overloads have infringed on other responsibilities. Yeah, that can be very tough. And how overloads work at each institution are different too. If you feel like maybe you should reach out to your grants or business office contacts, definitely do it earlier than you think, because sometimes it might take a while to hash out an issue, and I may not have that answer because, well, KSU works differently from GGC, which definitely works differently from UGA, and there's different policies that come in, different priorities that gear an office towards making a particular kind of decision. It's complicated. Accessibility, right. It would be helpful to meet individually people to support our specific needs. It's so hard to figure some of these things out. Right. Oh, thank you. Your guidelines are a rubric for accessibility requirements in online materials. Yeah. It's difficult because the new requirements are borrowed in some ways from website accessibility guidelines, and not all of those are going to apply to what we're doing here. So we try to make it a little bit easier to understand. Rebecca says we included on our team an accessibility expert as well as a quality matters expert. These folks reviewed the material for content creators. Yeah, if you can get accessibility folks, QM folks, instructional designers, they're super helpful.
Also on that point, in D2L, there is now accessibility checkers.
Mm-hmm.
They're not perfect, but it does help. So
Yeah.
you can just kind of go through templates and review, have the generators review stuff for you as well.
More support to coordinate with IT to get necessary approvals. So you're getting pointed around or saying not me. Oh man, that is a rough thing because often it's the approvals are coming from one LMS person somewhere in that organization. Resources for accessibility and pro tips. Yep. How to manage ADA compliance when using the NDG system. Aha. So that would be a tough one because that's very platform specific. Setting up grant processing at the beginning of the institution. Oh, yes. More support and scaffolding in the future. That's interesting. And one of the things that's tough to manage in the grants office, just like it is on a grant team, is turnover. Grants offices, when somebody changes there, and there's like institutional knowledge on why someone does something the way that they do in that grants office, all of a sudden that's lost. And they're like, I don't know what to do with this. What's ALG? Hey, do you guys do the STEM grants? Here's an invoice. And I'm like, okay, hold on. Let's talk. Nikita, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to mention also that while we're gathering this information, some of these things, of course, from the ALG perspective, we might be able to beef up some of our resources to support you in this way. So we appreciate you sharing it. Some of the stuff we can't even touch just because it's institutional specific and it changes with every department and institution. But one of the reasons we brought you together at the Midpoint meeting as well is that you can also reach out to each other and also your ALG champions on your campus. Jeff put a link in the chat earlier for your champions. And to help you see maybe past grantees at your institution so that you can talk to them about overcoming some of the same challenges specific to your institution that they had to deal with and ways to kind of deal with what do you do when you get to run around at IT or something like that. So being able to reach out to your champions, find past grantees that have been at your institution might also be helpful in providing support in areas that we can't actually provide support in.
All right, because there are a lot of accessibility comments here, I'm going to move on because we do have some accessibility things to talk about. So the last one is celebrating successes. What can you celebrate about your projects at this point? Comment, link if you've got them. So far, students have loved the new labs. That's great. Great feedback on evaluations. Implemented open source materials for the first trial. Very well received by students. Great. Project has successfully piloted, currently in the second phase of implementation, and student feedback has been positive. Student collaboration components. Oh, okay, you get a picture with your students at the conference, so you can post that on the newsletter. That's really cool. Feedback from the first semester was great. Awesome. Yeah, creating both notes and short videos, also using the iClicker tool. Students are using them as resources and they're motivated in the comments. Oh, awesome. Positive about the materials. A lot of students being positive about the materials. Very, very good. Occasional hiccups and needed revisions. That happens. It happens with our grant applications. Every so often, somebody would be like, hey, why does this question say this? And I'll look at it and I'm like, oh, it's because I messed that up. Hold on a second. So this stuff does happen for sure. Meeting next week with a colleague who wants to put in a grant proposal. Excellent. Yeah, 3 courses in total are going to be transformed. There's already one transformed in there, and all team members have worked really well together. Very good. Collaborating with undergraduates, creating materials and testing and receiving feedback in real time. Excellent. There's a sense of buy-in there. There's a new system that will work with labs being hands-on. Oh, very cool. And other resources that are no cost. Working on using current trends like apps at this point. Active learning component was possible due to the ALG support. Yeah, and for making the software possible and accessible for free for all students. Very cool. Lab manuals coming together. Ordering the equipment, receiving it, and creating content with it. That's awesome. Very cool. Great to hear all of this. So keep celebrating this. This Padlet's not going to go anywhere. So do share your stuff if you are still typing. That's awesome. I'm going to stop sharing the screen because what I'm going to do next is go into a little bit of accessibility stuff. Now, as if you've ever gone to CIDI over at Georgia Tech and thought to yourself, wow, they sure have a lot that they could share with us about accessibility, there's a ton. You would not be able to learn it in a day, a week, depending on how much detail they go into. But we will talk a little bit about the new rule for accessibility, the new federal rule that's coming in April. So this is from the Department of Justice, and by April 26th of 2026, all content on the web made available to the public by public entities used in services, programs, and activities must comply with the WCAG 2.1 level AA guidelines. What does that mean? Well, 2.1 was the standard at the time they made the decision. We can keep up with those standards as they evolve over time. This is the W3 consortium that does this, the folks that define things like standards on the web. So it's a good organization putting this together. AA means it's the middle one. It's not the minimum amount possible to make it accessible, but it's also not luxury accessible, like, hey, we also have like 5 copies of Braille for our textbook. Isn't that amazing? Well, not everybody can do that, right? AA is the realistic middle of between single A and AAA. AAA, think of like we have ASL interpreters for all of our videos. Amazing. That would be awesome if you can do it. Not everybody can. So there are some exceptions, but if you're using things in services and activities like education, that does need to comply. Some of this won't apply to OER. Like I said before, they're borrowing a lot of this from website accessibility guidelines, and we are not entirely creating websites over here. But there's stuff that's important for the things that we often work in, like Word and PDF and PowerPoint, that you would want to keep an eye on. And that's pretty much stuff that's in Chapter 1 of the WCAG guidelines. And it's all about being able to perceive the information that you are giving them in multiple ways. So if you have non-text content, there should be a text alternative. The reason why text is so important is because screen readers can read text. So you can visually read the text. You can audio, you can hear it because you have a screen reader that can take that text and convert it into something else. That way, it's a lot more flexible than if you had, say, a photo that does not have any text attached to it. You would have to be able to see it, and you'd have to have good vision in order to make out all the details. So if you have a photo in your resources, that photo needs alt text. If you've got Word or PowerPoint, you just right click and you say edit alt text and you add the alt text right to it. There's easy ways to do that. With PDFs, you just go into the accessibility part of it in tools, and then you can do add alt text and it goes through every single image and you can just add all of them if you want to. I would do it as soon as you add a photo though. Make sure that stuff is adaptable so that a program can read the text and understand what it is. So if you've got a textbook, unlike a website, so a website, they often say use one heading 1 and then use more heading 2s under that, and it's a tree structure. Everything branches off of heading 1. For a textbook, it's a little bit different. Our major organizing thing is usually the chapter, not a unit or, hey, here's the textbook, here's heading 1. Usually we have a title. Then we have chapter, chapter, chapter. Often chapters will be heading 1. And then if you do subchapters, that's heading 2. That gives a structure to the text. Because imagine you had a 600-page PDF and you tell your students, read chapter 12. you've got somebody who can't see. So they can't read the text. They have to have a screen reader read the text. And so the screen reader starts reading from page 1, all of this stuff. And then you just start guessing. Maybe, okay, go to page 300. Let's see what's there. If the screen reader doesn't know the structure, can't go by the headings, say, hey, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, it won't be able to jump around and things will be super inefficient for those learners. That's why styles matter so much. Use the styles pane in Word to do heading 1, heading 2, heading 3. Use layouts in PowerPoint. If you put in a thing that says title and content, just use those boxes that you have selected that you've told Microsoft you're using. The moment that you start throwing extra stuff in there, PowerPoint doesn't know the order in which to read it or to read it at all. So you wind up with these weird outlines if you look at the outline view in PowerPoint at that point. And it's like, well, a screen reader is going to go, all right, I've got this photo with alt text. I've got this text over here. I got this text over here. I'm just going to read in some order, and maybe the order in which you put them in, who knows? And that would not be good. These guidelines are available online. I will send you that link now. I think we are also linking to it at the end too. Yeah. We have a series of accessibility guides that are geared toward folks who are making OER, mainly instructors, and doing so using very common tools. So yeah, structure, very important, needs to be adaptable. Distinguishable. So if you are colorblind, let's say you are red-black colorblind, and you are using this textbook, and you say everything in red means something different, and everything in black means something else, and you have no other way to convey this means something different than this. If you can't tell the difference between red and black, which is very common in colorblindness, you won't be able to tell the difference between that text at all. You'll just read it all as one color. So do not use color as the only way to convey information. This is especially clear on graphs. So let's say you've got a line graph and red is one thing, blue is another, yellow is another, orange is another. It has to have something else. One's a dotted line, one's slashes, something like that. There are color blindness adjustments that you can make to those graphs to make sure that you are not just conveying information using only color. The other thing is color contrast. Most of the time when we are writing open textbooks, you're going to have a white background and black text. And if you put it on dark mode, you're going to have a black background and white text. And that's great. Every so often, and we had this back in rounds 1 and 2, folks would be like, check out my super creative textbook. It's got a purple background and black text. And I'm like, I can't even read this. This is not, we can't do it this way. So you have to make sure that the background color and the foreground color, the type, the font, all of that stuff, that they are very far apart from each other and can contrast with each other very well. Black and white is very easy as one. Technically, the most distinguishable combination is black and yellow, so congratulations to Georgia Tech. But yeah, be sure that the contrast meets that spec. Sometimes the accessibility checkers do check that, sometimes they don't. Word can check the contrast between the background and the type, but it can't check the contrast if you have an image. That's going to be a little bit different. Make sure that if you have text, you can resize that text. Pretty easy to do in most of the common applications that we have. If you have a PDF and you're taking photos and you're scanning them in to a PDF as the text, like, first of all, don't do that. But if you did, you wouldn't be able to resize that text. You could kind of zoom in and it'd be blurry. You zoom out, it's small. It's not easy to do that. And be sure not to use images of text. Back in the heyday of Twitter, when things were not so complicated, folks would share quotes that they thought were cool in some artistic format. They would, go into Adobe Illustrator and make an Abraham Lincoln quote look really nice, and then they put it there. folks would go, I like that. And they would grab them and they put it on their PowerPoints. If you do that, then now you have text in the form of an image. You could then put alt text and give the entire quote in the alt text, but why wouldn't you just use text in the first place? That makes it a lot more flexible. And like I said before, the programs that can read text are going to be a lot more versatile than programs trying to read an image. So yeah, don't use images of text. Now, this is the big stuff in chapter 1. There's other things in the WCAG guidelines, and a lot of them don't apply to making OER unless you're developing software and developing a new user interface for it. So for example, you should be able to get through everything with a keyboard, not just a mouse. So that's great for me. Sometimes I don't have a mouse handy, and if I just tab through for a while, I can get to the thing I need to enter in for a username or a password or stuff like that. If you can't use a mouse, that's even worse. So you have to make sure that there are multiple ways to do input in your software. That's not important for most people who are making OER, for most people who are writing in Word or even Adobe InDesign, right? That stuff's already set up. Same thing with making things understandable to machines, machine reader language. So if you're able to put in what language something is in, and you're going to be asked this more and more as 2026 progresses, it'll be, what language is this in primarily? You'll usually say English. Every so often you've got, a French immersion thing, and in that case, it's mostly in French. Be sure to put that language in there, because that helps a machine reader immediately know what it's reading. It doesn't have to guess. Then things like robustness, so being able to customize the look of things, that's more on the software side. You don't have to worry too much about that. Making sure that there's an error message when an error happens. That stuff we won't have to think about. Nikita says, warning though, if you use Smart Art right now, Microsoft Smart Art, it often registers as an image. So you will need to put alt text on your Smart Art, even though Smart Art is based on text that you type into PowerPoint. It is the silliest thing. They need to change that. This really should be on Microsoft to do it. But this is a warning that if you are using Smart Art to create diagrams and process flow and stuff like that, you'll still need to do some alt text to describe what it is that you're doing. Yeah, thank you, Nikita. So yeah, and then the last chapter is like how these requirements work. How would you report it? We don't really need to know too much about that, but it's cool to read. So be sure to focus on chapter 1. Make sure that things are perceivable in multiple ways. If you're used to Universal Design for Learning or UDL, you're going to be well acquainted with multiple modes of perception. This is that kind of thing. So there are ways to get to the WCAG guidelines from the W3 Consortium, but we also have our accessibility series and rubric, the ones that we have put in the chat over here. These started out, I believe, right as the pandemic heated up, because we brought in Tiffany Tiarina as a program manager, and one of the first things that she did was get some accessibility guides that weren't so technical and weren't so focused on software development and web design, and also weren't focused on being a lawyer or what happens when you go into the courtroom with accessibility. So yeah, much more about what we do, and we've updated them since. So that's just a little bit on accessibility. If you have questions about that, please do type them in or send them through email. I'm going to blaze right through though, because we've just got a little bit of paperwork reminders to do before 3 o'clock hits. At the end of your grant project, once you've submitted your final report, the institution needs to invoice us for the final invoice. That's the second half of that grant funding once that's sent. And that final payment request that we make out of the invoice goes over to accounts receivable, and then they do an electronic payment to the institution. Make sure that the invoice is sent directly to us through email. If it's sent through snail mail, it's difficult for us to then go and digitize the thing. If it's sent to someone else, it has to be received by someone else. They have to look at it and realize that it has to go to me. Then they have to send it over to me. And that will slow down the process immensely, if not stop it in its tracks. Make sure that the second invoice is sent over to us over here, especially me, because we're taking care of those invoices. We're routing them for payment. And it's the only way it can go. If you send it directly to accounts receivable, they're going to go, what is this? And they'll bring it to us and we'll go, sorry about that. We'll fix it. Then we do it. And it goes over. That's almost a best case scenario for it not being sent to us, though. So be sure it gets sent to us. Your final reports. So I'm not going to talk about semester status reports this time around because this round of grants, everybody ends in spring 2026, unless you have a big delay and amendment, in which case it may be a later semester. So when you submit your final report, you do not also submit a semester status report. You don't do both of them. You just do one, and make sure that it is the final report. Make sure you're using the final report template that is on the Grantee Information Center page. That page is super important. At the kickoff, I said, be sure to bookmark this. Really do be sure to bookmark this. It's got the deadlines. It's got the templates. It's got, yeah, this is smart art, by the way, and we would need to put alt text on it. So very good. The way to submit it is just one survey. Once you answer which kind of grant you have, we will route you to transformation, continuous improvement, or research questions. Recheck the SLA to make sure that you know what you've committed to do. Return to your proposals, as we talked about previously. So yeah, the Granting Information Center has the link. If you do transformation grants, if you do not have a letter on the front of those numbers, right, project 726, then you'll need the final report in Word. So do that one first. You'll need any data that you want to send over. You could just put it into one zip and we'll have it all as one file. With syllabi, same thing here. If you just put it into a zip folder, that works well. Highlight your files, right click to compress to zip, and you can send it that way. I might be a little bit old school by working with zip files at this point, but they're pretty easy to work with as opposed to trying to consolidate everything to one PDF. We don't want syllabi that are just descriptions of policies that you give folks at your institution. What we're looking for here, especially if you have adopted other materials and you say, we've adopted OpenStack's Anatomy and Physiology, and that's a multi-page, multi-chapter book. We want to know how you're using that. So a course schedule would be more accurate at that point. If you have your course schedule in your syllabus, do that. If you just have a course schedule and a syllabus, and your course schedule is like, all right, we're going through chapter 2 today, and then for chapter 5, we're not going to be in OpenStax. We're actually going to go over to this website and go over here. Folks need to know that. That's going to be a blueprint for further adoption down the line. So yeah, a helpful course schedule with links is what we're looking for there. Optional, a photo of your team or class. If you have something like that that you want to share and that ALG could share, like, hey, check this out. These are real people and real students. That would be super cool. It's optional. If you have the invoice ready, you can send it. Most of the time, your grants office is going to say, no, you send in the final report, then let us know, then we'll send in the invoice. Totally fine if that's the way that it works. Most of the time, that is how it goes. For continuous improvement, you need your Word document and your materials. If your materials are linked in the Word document, over to a LibGuide, to Google Drive, something like that, then that's it. If not, you can link them in an email. You could send them to me. We could work it out somehow. The method doesn't really matter so much. It's just that we need to make sure we get these materials so that we can share them in our repository under the open license you have designated or CC by default. So yeah, cloud storage helps if you've got really big files. If you've got small files, you can send them over through email and it'll be fine. You can host them on your campus webpage and link them to us, but be careful. If you're hosting them on your campus website and it's connected to your account, and you know that should you suddenly become the president of Stanford University, you leave and all of a sudden your stuff goes away, you would have OER just disappearing on you. So keep it sustainable as much as you possibly can. Attach them in an email if you can. It's very easy at that point. But yeah, we will be hosting them after that. You don't have to do the hosting part. You can send them right over to us and we'll do that. If you are hosting them, like some folks have open software on GitHub, that's cool. Absolutely. Link us to it and we'll take it from there. So the reporting deadline, spring 2026, this is on the Grantee Information Center page. May 15th is the deadline for spring 2026. That's enough time after everything has ended that hopefully you should be able to do that report. If you need a little extra time, let us know. There is a 31-day delay built into the SLA, and we can work with that. If it's longer than that, we would be delaying it to another semester. That means we would be altering the agreement, and that means we would need a signature from your institution, and then we'd get a signature from the USG, just like what happened with the actual service level agreement. But do get in contact with us if anything goes wrong and something needs to be delayed. You know, no matter how dire it sounds on your side of things, often once we get to know the issue, there's some sort of maybe not easy solution, but at least doable solution that we can fix. But if we are completely bypassed in that conversation, sometimes your grants or business office may just take action. Go, oh, nope, we're going to take back this money, and there it goes. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait, no, actually this work got done. Reach out to us first to make sure that we know what's going on if something has happened. Now, if you're delayed to summer 2026, the end of that is August 10th, so that's the deadline there. And yeah, just keep up with the Grantee Information Center page. The deadlines will be there. And we'll email the link again later on. So we got about 3 minutes left, and we're just going to wrap this up. Thank you so much for coming in for 2 hours and regrouping on these projects. Thanks so much to the panelists for sharing their amazing experiences. Dr. Wilson says, will this presentation be made available? Yes, we'll be emailing out this to the entire round. We're also going to be processing the video, making sure it has subtitles so it is accessible. That takes a little bit of time. So it won't be, I won't be emailing this to you 10 minutes from now. It'll be next week. But it will get to you. Yeah. Any questions before we go? I'm seeing some thank yous. Thank you also to Nikita for co-hosting this with me and also having a bit of a cold. I guess something's going around. I just heard from my wife. She was scheduled with a whole bunch of people working at the hospital who also just got diagnosed with COVID. So we'll see how that all goes. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I will end this meeting and stop recording, and you will hear from me next week with all of this follow-up stuff. Thank you.